The next day, Betty arrived at school, her face tense and her steps hurried. She had barely slept the night before, her mind filled with thoughts of Robinson's mother and her threats. The way she had confronted her father, the smugness in her voice, it all made Betty's blood boil. She stormed toward her usual spot under the big tree, hoping to find some peace, but her thoughts refused to settle. Christopher noticed her from across the field and immediately sensed something was wrong. Unlike her usual cheerful self, Betty looked troubled, her brow furrowed in frustration. Without hesitation, he walked over and sat beside her. "Betty, you look upset," he said, his voice laced with concern. "What's wrong?" Betty let out a deep sigh. "It's Robinson's mother. She came to our house yesterday and threatened my father. She said what happened to his garage was just the beginning. She's trying to scare us, and it's working. My dad is worried, and so am I." Christopher's expression darkened, his jaw clenched as he processed her words. "She threatened your father? That's crossing the line. Don't worry, Betty. My boys will keep an eye on her." Betty froze, turning to him in confusion. "Your boys? Christopher, what do you mean by that?" Christopher quickly realized his slip and tried to cover it up. No, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant I know some people who can keep watch, make sure nothing bad happens to your father again." Betty narrowed her eyes, still unconvinced. "Christopher, the first hope you're not hiding anything from me. I don't want any trouble, and I definitely don't want to make things worse." Christopher shook his head firmly. "I'm not hiding anything, Betty. I just want to help you. You don't have to go through this alone. I hate seeing you like this, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect you and your dad." Betty hesitated, uncertainty swirling in her mind. She wanted to trust Christopher, but his words left her with more questions than answers. Still, his concern felt genuine, and she decided to let it go for now. "Okay," she said softly, "but please, Christopher, don't do anything reckless. Robinson's family has too much power, and I don't want you to get hurt because of us." Christopher nodded. "I promise I'll be careful. I just want you to feel safe." Before Betty could respond, the school bell rang, cutting their conversation short. She stood up reluctantly, still feeling uneasy about everything. As they walked to class together, she silently prayed that Christopher's intentions were as pure as he claimed, and that her father would stay safe. Later that day, Betty sat in the school library, flipping through a textbook, trying to focus on her studies. The peace in the room was shattered when Robinson stormed in, his loud voice cutting through the quiet air. "There you are, you daughter of a poor mechanic," he sneered, standing in front of her. "Do you even belong in this school? Or did you sneak in just to sit under the fan because you can't afford it at home?" Betty calmly looked up from her book, her gaze sharp. She had had enough of Robinson's insults, and today she wasn't going to let him walk all over her. "Oh, look who's talking," she said with a smirk. "The son of a foolish, spoiled mother who can't get over my father. Your mother came to my house begging my father to be with her. How pathetic can you people get?" The room went silent. Robinson's face turned red with embarrassment. He opened his mouth to retaliate, but Betty wasn't done yet. "You think money makes you better than me? At least my father has dignity, unlike your loose mother who can't keep her legs closed. Go home and ask her who your real father is, because I'm sure even your rich father doubts you're his." Laughter erupted from the students in the library. Robinson clenched his fists, his pride shattered. Humiliated and furious, he stormed out without another word. As he paced outside, his rage boiling over, Christopher spotted him. Without hesitation, he walked straight to him and pointed a finger in his face. "You, Christopher said, his voice cold and sharp. "Stay away from Betty and her father. I'm warning you, this is the last time." Robinson turned to him, scoffing. "Who do you think you are, you son of a nobody? Do you even know who my father is? He's the personal assistant to a billionaire CEO. My family earns more in a week than your entire life is worth." Christopher smiled, stepping closer until they were eye to eye. His voice dropped to a chilling tone. "You think your father's job makes you untouchable? Let me tell you something, Robinson. You don't want to know who I am or what I'm capable of. Your family may have money, but they have no peace. Your mother can't stop chasing a man who doesn't want her. How embarrassing for you." Robinson scoffed, trying to maintain his composure, but Christopher could see the fear in his eyes. "Here's my final warning," Christopher continued. "Tell your mother to stay away from Betty's family. And don't let me catch you near Betty again, or I will make you regret it." Robinson laughed nervously, but he knew he had underestimated Betty and her mysterious protector. That evening, Robinson stormed into his house, slamming the door shut behind him. His mother, Bonita, was lounging in the living room, sipping a glass of wine when she heard the loud noise. She turned her head sharply, irritation flashing across her face. "What now?" she asked impatiently. Robinson threw his school bag onto the couch, his face red with frustration. "It's that stupid Betty again," he spat. "She humiliated me in front of everyone today. She called me the son of a foolish, loose mother. And that's not even the worst part. She told the whole school that you went begging her father to be with you." Bonita's face stiffened, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. "What?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Yes, she did," Robinson continued, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "And that's not all. There's this guy at school, Christopher. He's always defending Betty, acting like he's better than me. Today, he threatened me. He told me to stay away from Betty and her father, like he owns them or something." Bonita leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "Christopher?" she repeated, narrowing her eyes. "Who is this Christopher? What does he have to do with Betty?" Robinson scoffed. "Some nobody who thinks he's important. He keeps getting in my way. He even said I don't want to know who he really is. Like he's some big deal." A slow, calculating smile spread across Bonita's face. "Well, my dear son, don't worry. I'll handle this." Robinson's frustration turned into curiosity. "What do you mean, Mom?" Bonita leaned back, her voice filled with cold confidence. "First, I'm going to find out exactly who this Christopher is. I have my ways. I'll have my boys dig into his life, uncover every little secret he has. Once we know his weaknesses, we'll deal with him accordingly." Robinson's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "That's exactly what I want, Mom. He thinks he's so smart, but we'll show him who's really in charge." Bonita nodded, sipping her wine. "Leave it to me. And as for Betty and her father, they haven't seen the last of me. I'll make sure they regret ever crossing our family." A call that changed everything. The next day, Robinson's father sat in his spacious office, reviewing some documents, when his phone rang. He glanced at the unfamiliar number on the screen before picking up. "Hello? Who is this?" he asked sharply. The voice on the other end was calm, but it carried a mocking undertone. "You don't need to know who I am," the caller said smoothly. "Just listen carefully. Your wife has been causing trouble for a poor mechanic, threatening him because he refused to sleep with her." Robinson's father sat up straight, his grip on the phone tightening. "What nonsense are you talking about? Who are you?" The caller chuckled. "Oh, just someone who thought you deserved to know the truth. She even burned down the man's garage. And here's a piece of advice. Ask your wife who Robinson's real father is. Robinson's father froze, his blood running cold. His mind reeled as the words echoed in his head. "What are you saying?" he demanded. "Who are you?" But the line went dead. He sat there, gripping the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. Doubt crept in where there had never been any before. His wife's loyalty had never been a question to him until now. His hands trembled as he reached for his car keys. He needed answers, and he needed them today. Robinson's father drove home in a fury, his mind clouded with a storm of doubts and suspicions. The words from the mysterious caller echoed relentlessly in his head. Ask your wife who Robinson's real father is. It was absurd, unthinkable, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. He had always trusted his wife, never once questioning her loyalty. But now, with everything coming to light, he could no longer ignore the signs. The moment he stepped into the house, he didn't bother with pleasantries. His wife, Bonita, was sitting in the living room, sipping tea, looking as composed as ever. She glanced up, feigning concern. "You're home early," she said smoothly. "Is everything okay?" Robinson's father didn't waste a second. "Where's Robinson?" he asked, his voice cold and sharp. Bonita blinked, surprised by his tone. "He went out." "Why? What's wrong?" He stepped closer, his eyes burning with fury. "I got a call today," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Someone told me everything about you, about the mechanic, about how you've been threatening him because he rejected you." Bonita stiffened, her fingers tightening around the cup. "That's ridiculous," she scoffed. "Someone is clearly trying to stir trouble between us. Who even told you this nonsense?" Her husband wasn't fooled. He clenched his fists, his voice rising. "That's not all. They told me something else, something that makes me sick to my stomach." He took a deep breath, steadying himself before dropping the bombshell. "They told me Robinson is not my biological son." For the first time in years, Bonita's mask cracked, her eyes widened, and for a fleeting moment, panic flickered across her face. But she recovered quickly, shaking her head. "That's absurd. How could you believe such lies?" But it was too late. Robinson's father had already made up his mind. "I don't trust you anymore," he said, his voice filled with disgust. "You've been hiding things from me for years. I had a DNA test done, Bonita." The color drained from Bonita's face. "The results came back today," he continued, his tone final. "Robinson is not my son." A heavy silence filled the room. Bonita opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. She looked like a woman trapped, searching for an escape. Robinson, hearing the commotion, walked in at that moment, frowning. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between his parents. His father turned to him, his expression unreadable. "Pack your things." Robinson frowned. "What? Why?" His father's voice was like ice. "Because you're not my son." Robinson froze. "What are you talking about?" He turned to his mother, confusion and panic in his eyes. "Mom? What's he saying?" Bonita couldn't meet his gaze. She remained silent, her hands shaking. "Ask your mother," his father said, stepping back as if Robinson was a stranger. "She's the one who's been lying to both of us." Realization dawned on Robinson like a slow-moving nightmare. His chest tightened, and his hands curled into fists. "Mom, tell me it's not true," he whispered. But Bonita remained silent. His father pointed to the door. "Both of you get out of my house." Robinson's world shattered in an instant. He had gone from a privileged life to nothing in mere moments. His mother tried to plead, but his father had made up his mind. There was no forgiveness. With nowhere to go, Robinson and his mother left that night, carrying only a few belongings. The luxurious home they had once taken for granted was gone. They found themselves in a cramped, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town, a place that reeked of despair. Robinson, once the arrogant son of wealth and power, now found himself living in misery. The space was too small, the air too thick with resentment. Every day, he was reminded of what he had lost. But worst of all, he couldn't escape the truth. His whole life had been a lie, and he blamed only one person for it, his mother. A week later, Betty was sitting in her room when her phone buzzed. It was a call from Christopher. She hesitated before answering, still unsure of her feelings after everything that had happened. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Hi, Betty." Christopher's voice came through, cheerful as always. "I was wondering if you'd meet me at a restaurant today. I have something important to tell you." Betty frowned. "A restaurant? Which one?" "Golden Fork," Christopher replied. Betty's eyes widened. "Golden Fork? That place is expensive." "Christopher, where are you getting the money for this?" Christopher chuckled. "Don't worry about that. Just meet me there." Skeptical but curious, Betty checked her phone and saw a message Christopher had sent her money with a note. "Get yourself something nice to wear. You deserve it." Surprised, she decided to go. When she arrived, she was stunned to see Christopher waiting in a sharp suit, looking nothing like the boy she knew at school. "Christopher, what's going on?" she asked, sitting down. "How can you afford all this?" Christopher took a deep breath. "Betty, I've been keeping something from you. The stranger who helped your father? That was me. I sent him." Betty's jaw dropped. "What?" "I wanted to help you," Christopher admitted, "because I love you." Betty stared at Christopher, her mind spinning with disbelief. "You sent him?" she repeated, still trying to process what she had just heard. Christopher nodded, his expression serious. "I wanted to help your family, but I didn't want you to know it was me. I thought it would be easier that way. I had no idea he would go as far as asking for your hand in marriage. I swear, Betty, I didn't tell him to do that." Betty's hands clenched into fists. "So you mean to tell me that this man, who walked into my house and tried to buy me like I was some kind of property, was working for you?" Christopher looked genuinely shocked at her reaction. "Betty, I didn't know he would take things that far. That foolish boy overstepped his boundaries. I only asked him to help, not to interfere in your life." Betty leaned forward, anger flashing in her eyes. "Then explain why he thought it was okay to come to my father and propose marriage." Without hesitation, Christopher pulled out his phone and dialed the stranger's number. The moment the man answered, Christopher didn't even greet him. "What did you do at Betty's house?" he demanded. The man sighed. "Christopher, I'm sorry. I liked Betty's father when I met him. He's a good man, humble, kind, and honest. And honestly, who wouldn't want to marry the daughter of a man like that?" Christopher's voice rose in frustration. "But that wasn't your job. I asked you to help them, not to meddle in their lives. Do you even understand the trouble you've caused?" "I'm sorry, Christopher," the stranger said again. "I didn't mean to overstep, and you never told me you liked her." Christopher ended the call abruptly and turned back to Betty, who was still staring at him, arms crossed. "Betty, I swear, I had no idea he would do something like that," Christopher said earnestly. "I'm truly sorry. Please believe me." Betty shook her head, her emotions a mixture of anger and confusion. "Christopher, you should have told me the truth from the beginning. You sent someone to help us without even letting us know it was you. I know, Christopher admitted, and I'm sorry. I never wanted to upset you. I just wanted to make your life easier because I care about you. Betty studied him for a long moment. She could see the regret in his eyes, and deep down, she believed he was being honest. I don't know what to say, she finally admitted. Christopher reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. Betty, I messed up, but I want to make things right. I'm asking you to give me a chance to be your boyfriend. I promise to always be honest with you from now on. Betty hesitated. She had been through so much, and trusting someone again wasn't easy. But something in Christopher's eyes told her he was sincere. After a moment, she nodded slowly. All right, Christopher, but no more secrets. If you do anything like this again, we're done. Christopher smiled, relief washing over his face. Thank you, Betty. I promise I won't let you down.